Is there a difference among acidic drinks, including carbonated drinks, as it relates to demineralization of your teeth? I'm Dr. Rob alongside my partner Tammy, and you're listening to Dental Formulator's Playbook.
Yes. Well, previously we discussed the addition of calcium to orange juice
Yep.
and how that can reduce some of the juice's erosive potential.
Yes.
Okay. But what if calcium is not included and we're talking about soda or pop, wherever you're from, East Coast, West Coast, sports drink, or even Pedialyte? Are there differences?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. In fact, there are differences, and this relates to what we recently discussed in episode 26, where we were talking about, we introduced the concept of the calcium binding factors,
Yes.
right? And we talked about that with respect to citrate. I think there were three of them for there, and then there were two of them for malic acid. I think we call them what, malate 1 and malate 2, right?
Hmm.
And so, again, that was based on some of the reference information that I had compiled in my 2018 book. And today, at the end of the previous episode, we said, hey, we're going to talk a little bit about carbonated sodas. And so that's actually what we're doing today. We're
Okay.
following up on that episode, and we're going to talk about some carbonated drinks because I think that it's going to be really surprising. We're going to introduce some other acids as well. And I think that this is helpful from even, just from a formulation perspective, like what is the difference
Absolutely.
among some of these acids, and do they actually carry similar or different risks for enamel, right? Demineralization.
Right. So, as well as the acids, we're going to talk about pH, right?
Yeah, definitely. And again, pH is going to be the number one factor, right? If your pH
Hmm.
drops below what? 5.5.
Thank you.
Yep. Then you're going to have,
Guard.
yeah, then it's going to be one of those things where, there's going to be elevated risks for demineralization. If you have fluoridated enamel, the pH isn't necessarily 5.5 anymore, right? But just for carbonated apatite, which is the primary structure of our
Hmm.
teeth, of course, there's hydroxyapatite part of there too, but it's also carbonate apatite. All of that starts to demineralize around the pH of 5.5. So again, with fluoride, the pH is boosted a bit and it's more acid resistant. But still, in this particular case, pH is always going to be the number one factor. So that's one factor of it. But then we also know that acids impart different risk profiles, just
Yeah,
like,
we learned that last
yeah,
time.
just like we talked about with respect to apples, talked about that with
Hmm.
respect to oranges. And so it follows then that there might be some differences among some of these carbonated drinks, some waters, things like this. So,
Makes sense.
yeah.
But before we talk about sodas, can we talk about Pedialyte?
Yeah.
Because it's often
Yeah.
recommended as a great way to replenish electrolytes when you're sick for both kids and adults. However, the risks to the mouth aren't really discussed. And based on our assessments, well, I find it was really surprising and really more alarming than anything.
Yeah, it's interesting because Pedialyte is especially recommended if somebody has done a lot of vomiting, for instance,
Exactly.
or if there's a lot of output on the other end. And you need to get some of those electrolytes back. When we talk about electrolytes, when anybody talks about electrolytes, what are they talking about? They're talking about like sodium ions, like
Okay.
potassium ions. While calcium ions could also be part of the electrolyte mix, they're not usually included in formulations. And
Hmm.
there's going to be reasons for that. I mean, unless it's like calcium chloride, there's going to be maybe some tendency for some precipitation to occur. It might cause some haziness. But then even with calcium chloride, that might be a little bit too, drying out, you know.
Okay, that makes
And
sense.
so, or it just might have an unpleasant taste profile. So you'll see that in like your Gatorades, all your sports drinks, and it's including Pedialyte, which we'll just talk about here in a
Mhm.
minute. You're not going to have a lot of calcium in there. And so that's a concern because just like what we talked about, calcium is helpful for
Yeah.
minimizing, for mitigating some of that erosive potential, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the pH, we measured it, and the pH is 4. So that's low, and it was, I think we did what? The Pedialyte mixed fruit version?
Yeah, I
Was
think
that the
so.
version?
I
Okay.
think so. So, while I can understand that this was acidic, of course,
Yep.
I was floored that it was this acidic. It was really, it's almost on the level of orange juice.
Yeah, that's right. And again, if it's going to be at that level, already the pH, which we alluded to at the beginning of the show, right? If it falls below 5.5,
Yes.
then you're going to have increased risks for demineralization of the teeth. In fact, people who
Wow.
have a lot of regurgitation issues, acid reflux, they will actually manifest clinically thinner enamel. Their enamel
Okay.
will inherently be weaker. Their tooth structure will be different than somebody who doesn't even have that. So even if you're
Because
not
of the
blaming,
acids they
yep, just
bring
because of
up.
the acids that are just brought
Oh,
up,
okay.
it's just one of those things. And so you want to have a way to get electrolytes back in the body. Pedialyte is recommended.
Absolutely.
You were on Pedialyte,
I was.
after certain surgeries,
Yes.
where we don't need to talk about that too much, but the point is sometimes dentists aren't even aware of the thinning of enamel that can happen with Pedialyte. They just look at that and say, "Hey, look, this might be something good." And so this is one of the reasons why we're bringing that up because the awareness isn't universally known that drinks that are supposed to be helpful systemically for your
Exactly.
body can be damaging for your mouth. So,
Well, we even mentioned that with orange juice. Orange juice systemically is
absolutely.
very good, but it could be damaging to your mouth if certain precautions
Yeah,
aren't
if
taken
certain
and what.
precautions. Yeah. So, here we talked about the Pedialyte lacking calcium already. So, in the
Mm-hmm.
ingredient list, and anybody can look at that. There's not too many ingredients. We'll just talk briefly about that. But it has citric acid, right? And it's gonna because it needs to taste good. So citric acid
Oh,
is one of
right.
those, flavoring powerful acids, small organic acid that's used to help improve the appeal of the flavor for our taste buds, right? I mean, that's just one of the things. So it has citric acid, plus it also has two citrate salts, potassium and sodium citrate.
Okay, so and at that pH that you mentioned, like 4,
Yep.
citric acid would be in the form of citrate, I think we talked about last time, just like the potassium and sodium citrates, right?
Yeah, that's right. So these are not going to be intact salts. These are going to be electrolytes, meaning you're going to have your separate potassium and your sodium ions, but then you also have the anions, and so it's going to be citrate one. Remember, we
Okay.
talked last
Yes.
in the previous episode, episode 26, we talked about citrate one having a certain binding constant. It has up to three. Here you're going to have again citrate one present not only from citric acid but also contributed from these salts.
Okay, so well, the potassium and sodium ions clearly they help to replenish electrolytes, which is the whole purpose. The citrate components are doing the damage to the teeth,
Yes, that's right.
and because there is no calcium, there's no protection against dental erosion. So that's a kind of the overall.
Exactly. So you have the
Okay,
pH, citric acid, and the citrate salts. All of those are going to present significant erosive risks, especially in absence of calcium.
okay, but does this formula have zinc gluconate? Like, would that help?
Yeah, I mean, it has zinc gluconate, and zinc gluconate is going to be helpful, right? But it's going to be limited. Zinc, as we know and as we've discussed previously, sometimes added to mouthwash formulations,
Mm-hmm.
helps to combat bad breath. It's an astringent, though, has an unpleasant taste. Often those mouthwashes, something like Smart Mouth, for instance, I just dislike it's too astringent. There's other mouthwashes that also have some zinc in them. Not my favorite. It's really hard to mask that. So you
Okay.
often want to keep that lower. To do that, sometimes zinc citrate is used, but zinc citrate is not soluble. So one of the reasons why zinc citrate is probably not used in Pedialyte is because it's not fully soluble in the formulation. Zinc gluconate, readily soluble, meaning it produces basically a clear solution.
Yeah,
So
nobody wants a cloudy, yucky
yeah,
solution.
but what can that do? Zinc can actually have some protective benefits against demineralization. In fact, topical dental products will often have zinc in them along with fluoride. The interesting aspect of that is sometimes if you have too much zinc, if it's in a fluoridated topical product, that will actually inhibit the amount of fluoride getting deeper into the tooth or even being able to
Oh,
deliver its benefit. So it's kind of like a game, and one really has to design a formula if it's going to be a topical dental formulation for those benefits. Here, the
mm-hmm.
zinc gluconate, is it going to provide some benefit? It probably does provide some benefit, but I think it's going to be minimal, again, due to the pH, the citric acid, and
Mm-hmm.
then the two salts. I just think it's too much to
Okay.
overcome. Like, there's not enough zinc in there to overcome all of those other factors.
Right. There's too many variables
Right.
and whatnot. So, not to mention, it does contain dextrose, right? So, in addition to erosive risks, then it could present caries-based risk,
Yeah,
right?
that's an issue too, right? So it's not like you can brush your teeth right after you drink the Pedialyte. Why? Because it's too erosive. Don't do it. If you brush with your teeth right afterward, then you're also going to be contributing wear, the physical removal of mineral from the
Yep. We
teeth,
talked about that last time.
and so that's also going to be presenting a risk. The downside is it has sugar, right? It has dextrose. So if you just leave that in your mouth,
Can't do that.
then even if you don't have erosive, then you might have caries based risk factors then. And so that is the other side of this. And so if somebody is prescribing like a steady diet, a Pedialyte, and sometimes physicians will do this or
Yes.
doctors trying to treat these conditions, think about maybe if you're in a hospital and you're recovering from a surgery and you need
Mm-hmm.
electrolytes and you're already
Absolutely.
dehydrated because you just came out of your anesthesia. You have dry mouth, you don't have good salivary buffer
Mm-hmm.
capacity in the moment. All of a sudden, you're
That's a
drinking some
great
of
point.
these, electrolyte heavy drinks. Know that they're going to be acidic and they're not going to have the suitable calcium content that would be able to provide some kind of, mitigation against that erosive risk. And obviously, they're going to have dextrose. Why? Our bodies still need sugar. We are carbohydrate based animals. We need sugar to function
And they want it to
and
taste
they
good, and
want
they
it to taste good.
want
So,
us to drink it because
yeah,
when you're sick,
so
you don't want to drink or eat anything.
yeah, this was a heavy discussion on Pedialyte, but I think that that's really helpful to understand. Again, but it can be mitigated, right?
Yes. So if someone might use this to replenish electrolytes,
Sure.
you know, lost due to sickness, wouldn't it make sense to suggest supplementing it with calcium, even if it's like chewing Tums,
Yeah, even
as well
some,
as
yeah.
sure, or as well as ensuring you're not brushing your teeth immediately afterwards?
Yeah, you don't want to brush your teeth afterward. Maybe a mouthwash, maybe one that has a bit of fluoride, for
Okay.
instance. That might even help. So that's one way. Now, if you are having a steady diet of Pedialyte for whatever reason, then are there topical dental products that you might be able to use that might be able to confer additional benefits that will help reduce this?
Actually, everything that we've talked about before, it makes me think. So whether it's going to be like a stannous fluoride
That's
over the
right.
counter,
OTC.
or even prescription strength sodium fluoride toothpaste, right?
Yeah, that's right. And again, it's the combination of the stannous plus the fluoride that even
Right.
has a better effect. It has a better effect on the pellicle. It has a better effect against erosion because the pellicle is intimately related to the erosion. And we talked about that in a prior episode.
Hmm.
But also higher level prescription sodium fluoride level, products can also do that. I hesitate a little bit because there are stannous fluoride mouthwashes that are prescription strength. Those are more concentrated. I don't think that those need to be used as much. Again, one of the drawbacks of stannous fluoride is that it has staining potential.
Right. I remember.
And in the mouthwash, there isn't going to be enough other ingredients in there to help prevent the staining. And so, while there are other professional or higher strength stannous fluoride options, I would probably choose a 1.1% sodium fluoride topical
Okay.
product, maybe one that has less abrasion
Hmm.
and that won't have then the staining potential, but also has a higher degree of being able to have the fluoride available so that it gets caught and lingers in the mouth just over time, just naturally, and all the different sites that are in the mouth, whether it's the teeth or the cheek, gum line,
Hmm.
things like that. That can provide better benefits for sure.
Okay. So, I mean, you're already sick and having to worry about one more thing about
Yeah,
using the things
right.
going to make you better, but it's something to be aware of. And it's something that you want to be able to mitigate it all, if at all
Yeah,
possible,
that's
especially
right.
if you're using it long term.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're on that long term, or if you already have problems with, acid reflux, maybe you're bulimic, or maybe you just have some kind of systemic, infection or
Right.
some kind of systemic situation that is just requiring a little bit more, you probably should be on a prescription dental product, like a
Okay. That
1
makes
sodium
complete
fluoride.
sense.
And if you're not, if you don't want to do that, then I would definitely lean more towards an OTC level stannous fluoride product, just because I think it's just going to give you better protection
Makes
against
sense.
the erosion, the mineral in your teeth. I mean, there isn't a lot of other options out there. Researchers are looking at this. We've done shows before where we talked
Hmm.
about, hey, shave a sheep, save a tooth, right? They're trying to figure out proteins
Yes.
that can actually help to stimulate new
Yes.
mineral growth,
Yes.
directional, not just a glob of mess, but, they're trying to figure these things out, but
Okay.
it's still premature for that. So
Yeah.
good area of research, of course, but I think that,
We need to know
I
more.
think that's it. Yeah. So I think that's enough about Pedialyte.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Okay, so let's switch gears
Okay.
because we told people in the last episode we're going to talk
Yep.
about soda or pop or wherever,
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, so about the differences in pH or acids then in sodas or pop. Are there any significant
Oh my.
really variations?
Yes, absolutely. And here we're going to talk about a number of different pops or sodas and whatever you like, carbonated beverages. And I want,
Okay.
just be patient with us because there's going to be a lot of names, a lot of brand names that we're going to be throwing
The
out there.
names aren't as important as the acids that they
Right.
contain, though, right?
Right. But
But it's good to know who
yeah,
has
it's
what.
almost going to feel like an alphabet soup after a while here. So let's first take just Coca-Cola
Okay.
and Pepsi. Okay, so the maybe two of the more original two. I know that there's other
Absolutely.
ones that go back, like Dr. Pepper and stuff like
Start
that.
at the
We'll get to
beginning,
those
right?
in a minute, but Coca-Cola and Pepsi, let's just keep it there. Caramel colored sodas, right? They're
Yes.
not clear, they're caramel
Yeah.
colored, and they have similar pH. It's about 2.5, by the way. So way more acidic than orange juice,
Yeah.
right? Way more acidic than Pedialyte. But I think it's important to know that they both have similar pH and it's about 2.5. Now, if anybody wants
Okay.
even more information, you can look at a Journal American Dental Association 2016 article. That's the kind of data that
Okay.
some of the data that we're talking about in today's episode is related to that article.
Okay.
And it's unfortunate because I think it's only been referenced 56 times. I think the last time I looked, and I mean, this is a big issue. This is a big issue. The erosion is a big issue, the awareness. And we're not necessarily just trying to talk about this just to dental, you know, researchers, to clinicians or student, we're this is going across the board because the awareness is going to be the key,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, and obviously, I mean, everyone pays attention to the systemic problems that sodas can
sure,
impart
everybody
or
talks.
whatnot.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
they're not. What we're not talking about, obviously, is there's a dental erosion risk that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, let's go. So Coca-Cola, Pepsi, caramel colored, what kind of acids? Do you think it's citric acid? Do you think it's malic acid like we talked about?
Which one? So, my mom always preferred Pepsi,
Okay.
and she preferred it because it has a sweeter taste.
Okay.
So, I will think that's got to have citric acid in then.
So it probably has citric acid. Yes, the Pepsi does. You are correct about that. So if they
Okay.
can taste challenge, which one is which?
Hmm.
Only one of them has citric acid. Pepsi is one of them, but it's not the only acid that it uses. Pepsi also uses phosphoric acid.
So both.
Yeah, and while Coca-Cola only uses phosphoric acid.
Okay, so you're talking about the original versions,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So not the cherry flavored or
Nope.
the caffeine free or the diet or the vanilla version.
Right, right.
Um, so Pepsi has two,
Yep.
the phosphoric and citric, while Coca-Cola only has
Yep.
phosphoric. Okay.
Yep, that's right. So which one do you think might have stronger attraction to calcium?
Oh,
Well,
Pepsi, right?
I mean, Pepsi has the phosphoric and the citric, but I guess probably the question is which acid is going to be even more debilitating, or is it the same? So is phosphoric acid similar in its attraction to calcium as citrate, or do you think that it's more or less?
Oh, goodness gracious. I'm gonna get this wrong. Less.
Actually, phosphoric acid is stronger. It has a stronger calcium binding
Okay.
constant relative to citrate 1. Actually, the factor is 1.4.
Whoa.
1.4 compared to citrate 1, which had
One.
about
About one,
1.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So, and just to let everybody know, is phosphor considered an organic acid? No, it's an inorganic acid. Why is it inorganic? Doesn't have carbon in it. It doesn't have any kind
Okay.
of derivation from that. So,
Okay. So the fact that phosphate is significantly like 40%
yeah,
stronger
40%.
than citrate, then
Yeah, it has a stronger
um,
binding. Yep.
everyone knows that soda's not healthy, right? We
Yep.
just talked about. So it's not surprising. However, the stronger affinity of phosphoric acid to calcium certainly turns it a little, I mean, makes you think of it a little differently.
Yeah, that's right. And while, it's hard to tell which one is worse because the pH is already 2.5 for each
Yeah.
one. Now, there might be some synergies, though, with enhanced damage because you have citrate, which claws, right? And then you have phosphoric acid, which already has a higher binding anyway than citrate. So there's going to be probably an increased level of risk for Pepsi. Might be marginal. Again, the pH is a dominant factor here. They're both
Mm.
2.5. They're going to be doing damage. Now, that was just for the two, like
The two original
just
formulas.
plain
Okay.
Pepsi and Coke and stuff. And I know Pepsi came way after, and there were other sodas even before, Pepsi.
But
But if we're
those are the
just,
main
yeah, but those
ones.
are the main ones that use primarily phosphoric acid.
Okay.
Okay. So there's other acids that are introduced in order to try to get some of these different variations, whether you're talking about diet, versions, caffeine free, cherry flavored, things like this, vanilla flavored.
Always wondered.
And benzoic acid is one of those additional acids.
So wait, benzoic acid, we usually use that as an added preservative, right?
Yep,
So we've
absolutely.
discussed this several times with formulations and whatnot. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it can also be added for flavor.
Yeah, so whenever you see any of these carbonated drinks that have benzoic acid in there, it's not only for preservative purposes, it's going to be for flavor purposes.
Okay.
And I think that this is really interesting because, there's going to be several that have citric acid, maybe benzoic acid. Coke Zero and Diet Cherry Coke only use citric and benzoic acids. They don't use phosphoric acid. So
Okay.
there's an example right there where replace phosphoric acid
Right.
with benzoic acid. All of a sudden, you have a different taste profile. And it
Okay.
doesn't end there. Mountain Dew, we're talking about regular, diet, code red. Mug root beer, regular and diet. A&W cream soda, regular and diet. Barks, regular and diet root beer, right? Sprite, regular and diet. I think they call theirs like Sprite Zero or something if it's the diet. Seagram's ginger ale, both regular and diet. 7 Up, cherry flavored as well as diet, and Fanta.
Okay. So you're saying none of those have phosphoric
No,
acid.
none of those have phosphoric acid, and you'll notice that, some of those might be dark colored, some of those might not be.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the point is, they're using benzoic acid, they're using citric acid, they're using other acids. Okay, the pHs are still very low.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So you talked about ones that don't have any phosphoric acid. Are there any that have only phosphoric or only benzoic acids?
Yeah, well, the ones that have first, there still ones that have phosphoric acid? Yes, phosphoric, citric, and benzoic. So with all three of those acids, you actually have Diet Coke, caffeine-free Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, Pepsi Cherry Vanilla, Dr. Pepper Cherry Vanilla, regular, and diet.
They have
Now,
all three.
yeah, they have all three. Now, the ones with just phosphoric and benzoic, but no citric, that's going to be your Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper was one of those original
Ooh.
sodas that would came
Very
out,
different taste.
right around the time of the original Coke, regular and diet flavor. Yes, and I believe that the benzoic acid is contributing to that unique Dr. Pepper taste. So,
Okay.
is it in there for preservative purposes? Maybe not. Maybe so. Again, the pHs of these are all, less than
Yeah.
4 for sure.
Yeah.
They're between 4 and 2.5. And Dr. Pepper, I think, is in the threes and stuff. At lower pHs, by the way, just from a formulation perspective, there is less effort needed to preserve the formulation, whether it's a toothpaste or mouthwash, or even if it's a soda, if it's a foodstuff, from microbial
Right.
contamination.
Okay. That makes sense.
Higher in pH you go, the more you need to add preservatives. So these are already very acidic systems. Although they are high water content, they're very acidic.
Right.
And acids like citric acid are also recognized as a preservative.
Yes.
So same thing with benzoic acid. It's a preservative, but it's also for flavor. So citric acid for flavor and preservative. Malic acid, you think that could act as a preservative and
Yes.
as a
Yes.
flavor enhancer? Absolutely. So this is all of the advantage. And so we don't want to convey the fact that benzoic acid is only in there for preservative purposes. That is false. Okay.
No, I think that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
not whenever we're talking about comestibles, beverages, things like this.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like benzoic acid's pretty common.
Yes, that's right.
I know that we always use it for preservatives, but the fact that it has an impact on taste is really
Yep.
so. Let's see, how does it compare to citric acid?
Yeah, so this is really important, right? Because we're talking about the affinity
Yeah.
of these acids to the calcium that, from our teeth,
Right.
right? So the calcium binding constant of the anion of benzoic acid, and there's only one, so it's just benzoate. If you want to
Okay.
call it benzoate 1, that's fine. But well, it's actually much lower than citrate. Do you think it's lower than malic acid?
Because you asked, I'm going to say yes.
Yes, it is. Actually, it has a level of about zero point 0.2.
The calcium binding level is about zero point 0.2, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's right. Remember,
Okay, that's
citrate
really low.
citrate had
Around
about
one,
one,
right?
and phosphate one had a citric or had a binding constant of about.
1.4,
Yep. So benzoate is about 5 times less.
which means the binding is not very strong,
That's
right?
right. That's correct.
Okay, okay.
So I think that that's really important. And again, in the previous episode, we talked about a 2008 study that looked at what happens to the pH of a system
Mm-hmm.
whenever you had a 1-to-1 ratio of calcium chloride, whenever small organic acids like citric acid or malic acid were added to that.
Mm-hmm.
They also looked at benzoic acid. And the
Okay.
drop was significant for citric acid. Remember, I think it was about 1.28.
Okay.
And, malic acid, it was about zero point 0.2. So if the benzoate has much weaker affinity to calcium
Right.
relative to malic acid, and malic acid only produced just a 0.28 or zero point 0.2 pH drop, do you think that the benzoate had higher or a lower pH drop relative to malic acid?
I would guess lower.
Yeah, lower. It was about 0.07.
Wow. Okay. That's a really small reduction, like 65% smaller than malic acid, which in the
That,
last episode we were like, oh, that one's kind of the better acid, right?
yeah,
Because it's
that's
not, it
right.
doesn't seem as
It
damaging.
doesn't seem as
So
damaging.
benzoic acid seems that it's not really a significant risk for dental erosion at all. So it actually sounds like might be a good choice.
Yeah, it's actually not a bad choice. Again, it depends on the taste profile, of the beverage that you're working
Okay.
with. So it's important to keep that in mind for formulations, whether you're
Yes.
talking about topical dental formulations or whether you're talking about comestibles. It doesn't matter. These different acids, citric acid, phosphoric acid, benzoic acid, and yes, phosphoric acid is also used as a preservative. You will find this sometimes in yogurts and stuff. Phosphoric
Okay.
acid will be there as part of the preservation system. This is just part of it. So
The
these acids can be
formulation.
very common, but we have to, what we're trying to do is obviously build awareness. What is in the food, what is in the drinks, and what are in the dental products that we're using?
Yeah.
Are these things usual? Are these, presenting different levels of risk? And obviously they are by virtue at least of their different calcium binding constants.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is I know we're dental formulators playbook, but a lot of the ingredients that we use in the oral care products are often used in the food industry. So
Yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
information that we provide here it's also
It's
going
a
to
place.
translate.
Yeah, that's right. So, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing it.
Okay.
These we're not siloed, right?
No, no,
You
it
know,
can't be.
you can't be if you're going to be even that much more knowledgeable and effective. Whether you're a formula or whether you're just using this stuff. If you're
Right?
drinking something. So,
Okay.
okay, so
So which sodas then don't have benzoic
yeah,
acid?
so there are some that don't have benzoic acid. 7 Up is one of these is one of these sodas actually, or carbonated beverages. That's a clear, obviously soda, and it only has citric acid. But
Okay.
Pepsi, caffeine-free Pepsi, Pepsi Vanilla, made with real sugar, they have citric plus phosphoric acids.
Okay, so I'd like to go the opposite
Yeah.
direction and
Yep.
say, are there any with just benzoic acid since that one seems to be the least damaging?
Yeah, in fact, there is A&W root beer, which also has a pH near 4.2, by the way.
I love A&W root beer.
Yeah, A&W is pretty good.
Okay,
Yeah, but
so
that's
the pH is way higher than I expected.
yeah, but it's interesting. So you have some that only have benzoic acid, and you only have a few that don't have any benzoic acid. So, with that list that I just mentioned,
Yeah.
like Pepsi's, just those 3 Pepsis had no benzoic acid, and then of course 7 Up. So you had about four. Whereas whenever we were talking about, hey, which ones has citric acid plus or phosphoric,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more have benzoic acid, right?
Wow. Okay. So I don't think I ever realized that benzoic acid was so widely used,
Yeah.
and it seems I like it because it's the least damaging, is what it sounds. That's what I keep hearing.
Yep, yep. And the
Okay.
the diet version of A&W, in case anybody's interested, well, that has a little bit higher pH, about 4.5. And that's another general consideration here. Your diet sodas will typically have a slightly higher pH
I had no idea.
relative to the non-diet versions. Yeah,
I had
it's
no
kind of
idea.
interesting, isn't it?
Okay. So with the diet version of A&W root beer, you said it had a higher pH, right?
Yep, it has a higher pH, so benzoic is also there, but then they also have another acid present besides benzoic acid.
Okay, so it's slightly different than the
Yeah,
regular
and it has to because the diet will
taste
taste
profile.
differently relative to the one with
Okay.
flavor or high fructose corn syrup,
Okay.
whatever, whichever.
Well, I'm guessing because they want to make it sweeter, it's going to be citric acid.
No,
Okay. Well, I got that wrong. Phosphoric acid.
nope.
Okay. So I'm going to listen and have,
Well, remember the diet soda had a slightly higher pH, so it
yes,
makes it
not
so
as
that it wouldn't,
damaging.
yeah, so it's not as damaging. So it probably doesn't have citric acid or phosphoric acid. So it has
Malic
malic
acid.
acid. Yep.
Okay.
The
So
apple acid.
exactly, the apple acid, and like we just said, it's less damaging
Yep.
than citric and or phosphoric.
Yep.
So that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. Another one that uses malic acid is going to be Diet Canada Dry Ginger Ale.
I would never have thought.
Yeah. The ginger
So
ale, yeah, I mean, is it surprising? Maybe it has citric acid and benzoic acid as well. The pH is around 3, but the regular Canada Dry, again, if the regular is going to be lower in pH,
right,
remember the Diet Canada Dry pH about 3.
right.
The regular Canada Dry ginger ale has a pH of about 2.8, and that lacks the malic acid.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay. So it sounds like the diet's kind of introduced the malic acid.
it depends on the brand overall.
Okay.
Number
Those
one,
two that we talked about.
yep,
Yeah.
if you're going for like a Canada Dry ginger ale, they're going to have their own profile, right? And so they're going to define that and they're going to use citric acid, benzoic acid, maybe malic acid.
Okay.
Kind of like how Dr. Pepper had the benzoic acid plus
Yes.
the phosphoric acid. And then they start tinkering a little bit with maybe you add in another acid.
And all this time, I thought that I wouldn't have thought that acids determine the flavor as much all this time.
All right,
Yeah.
yeah, in the
Okay.
tasting, and we'll probably touch on this, I think, in the future here because all of this impacts taste, saltiness,
Yep.
sweetness,
Makes sense.
tartness, or bitterness, right? Yeah, these are some interesting interplays,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to get the right flavor. One of the challenges we always find in formulating is how do you get something that's going to taste good?
Yeah.
Because certain people might like different kind of flavor
Yes.
profiles. Maybe
Absolutely.
somebody likes it with a nice cooling taste,
Mhm.
refreshing taste afterwards. Some people don't like peppermint, so you can't use peppermint if you're going
Right.
to do that. And of course, menthol is part of peppermint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might lack that. And, there's some interesting interplays. And if anybody really wanted to know that, I mean, people who've already experienced this, I mean, if you just wanted to substitute, for instance, salt, regular table salt,
Mm-hmm.
with potassium chloride, it's probably going to taste quite nasty.
We've tried that before. It's
Yeah.
not a
Our
good.
receptors, yeah, our receptors are more sensitive to sodium, not potassium. And
Okay.
so it's going to taste bitter, probably, or just unpleasant if you were to use potassium
I
chloride.
remember. I
Right.
remember
So, I
that.
mean, so this is a very complicated area, but I think it's one that's really interesting. And all of a sudden, you
Definitely.
start looking at ingredients, and yeah, I am that guy who looks at the ingredients all the time
Yes, you
at a
are.
store or something, and like, hey, what's in this?
Yes.
Just of course, people don't have time for all this, but
But you do, and it's what you do, so it
well,
makes sense.
I just find it interesting. Maybe I'm a dork that
So
way.
we just discussed a ton of different carbonated beverages.
Yeah, we did.
And I know we don't have too much time left. So, but one that's really important, I think, is flavored waters. I imagine they have to have at least citric acid, right?
Yeah, this is something that's a little bit. It's a little bit questionable, right? People say, well, I want something that's going to be refreshing and taste good.
Hmm.
They think they're doing great by having water.
Yes.
And flavored water, anything flavored is going to taste better than unflavored
Well,
things.
nobody just wants to drink plain regular water. They just
Yeah, and
don't.
so it's one of these things where okay, you don't want to have a
Well,
carbonated drink because that might contribute to unhealthy, I don't know, just
or even
systemic
acids and
things,
everything.
acids and everything else. It's not good systemically, not good for your teeth. But surely flavored water is good, right? Wrong. Not necessarily. Most of these have citric acid. Yes, absolutely. Citric acid is going to be the default acid. We already talked about the strength of citrate, right? To
Yes.
calcium in the binding. So we already talked about that. We also talked about if it's going to have citric acid, the pH is probably going to be much
Low.
less than 5.5,
Oh
right?
my
So it's
gosh.
going to, present some demineralization, some erosive risks in the mouth. It just will. And
Okay.
so, what kind of brands? I mean, all of the brands have this. If we're talking about And these are all non-carbonated brands, right? Sobe, Clear American, Dasani, Propel, Fruit 2O, Nestle, Avite, which also has caffeine. All of those brands of non-carbonated waters have pH less than 4. So you're already at risk with demineralization, okay? Now they
pH
also
less than
have
4 and citric acid.
yes, and citric acid, and then even for carbonated water. So if you think, hey, I just want to have, feeling, a bit stylish, a bit chic, I'm going to have some carbonated drink. Would you
Bubbly.
have, yeah, some bubbly that's, non-intoxicating. LaCroix, Aquafina, Ice Mountain, Dasani, Schweppes, all have pH less than 4. All of them because they also have citric acid for the flavor enhancing. Now, what's interesting is that one of these brands, and I chuckle at this because I never would have thought this, Dasani also has phosphoric acid in it too.
But
So
why?
it has, phosphoric and citric for the flavor profile.
Okay,
They're trying to
so
create that certain taste profile. People like certain flavors and they're trying to get that. So I think that that's kind of interesting. And by the way, Dasani is a member of that Coca-Cola,
okay.
brand. So it kind of makes sense. This isn't something that
They're
is,
not brand new to it. Okay, so I bet that's new information for some
yeah.
water with phosphoric acid. Citric acid, I would
Yeah,
totally
totally
understand, but
understand. Yep.
otherwise, okay. So, what among like the sparkling waters? What about, okay, let's go with some fancy fizzy water. Perrier.
Yeah, Perrier, right?
Perrier, yes.
Yeah,
Let me
however,
be fancy.
that has a pH at or above 5, but they have different flavors. And so, including one with lime flavored, and that one goes below 5.
Okay, so that would make sense because lime already has a very low pH. So I think
Absolutely.
less than one,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, limes are
Yeah.
probably the most acidic natural
Yeah.
fruit that
Yeah.
there is. It is
Okay.
just loaded with these citrates and some other acids that are just driving down that pH. So
Yeah.
I don't think many people know that limes themselves. So imagine having a margarita and
Even more so than lemons.
yeah, well, exactly. So if you have a lime
I
with
love
yeah,
margaritas.
well, I mean, yeah, I do too, or if you have a beer and everybody wants to put lime is just great, right? I mean,
Or the tequila
it's
shots
very
and
acidic.
lime. I hadn't even thought
Yes,
about that.
that's right. And the limes have some of the most potent acids, and that actually meshes well with the alcohol and the other flavors that are in the mixed
Okay.
drink. So, the citrates are so important to taste. We cannot underline that enough. And I hope we don't. I know we're beating on the head between the last episode and this episode,
Right.
but it's a subject that is definitely worth attention because citrate is so prevalent in everything and anything,
And
you
citric
know?
acid is always one of your favorites to formulate with. It's
Oh, yeah.
really it can make or break a
It can
formula
make or break.
in the smallest of
Absolutely.
amounts.
Yep, absolutely. So if you want to know, so what?
So
Perrier,
yeah, well,
San Pellegrino?
yeah. So those are probably your two most popular, right?
Yeah, now San Pellegrino natural sparkling water has a pH of around 5.5. So it's right there at that level where you might have
Not
demineralization, you
bad
might not.
then.
Yeah, so it's not bad. San Pellegrino is probably the healthiest carbonated beverage out there.
Okay.
Does it have fluoride? No. And is unflavored. But because of the pH, it probably is one of the safest, most gentlest for the teeth.
Okay. I would not have guessed that.
Do you know the
That's
difference
good to
between them?
know. No.
Perrier is derived from natural carbonated spring water, whereas San Pellegrino, it's infused by external carbonation. So
Oh.
it, but
So
it's
it's not as damaging
so it's
because
not
it,
as damaging, but that's just the brand preference. They just wanted to use external carbonation to get it, you
well,
know?
they have a marketing point they're not even aware of.
Yeah, especially because they call theirs natural sparkling water
Well, of
in the
course they
branding, even
do.
though it's not really natural. But it's okay. But that's a branding thing. We're not going to hold
Okay,
anybody to account.
no, so for the teeth, San Pellegrino is least damaging.
Yep, they're
Okay, there's my take home.
yep. And even so, I mean, even if you were to have the Perrier, unless you're having the lime flavored version, you're probably not doing too much damage. I
Okay.
mean, again, it's not just the pH of the item, but it's how the pH interacts with the mouth pH. We talked about that last
Yes,
episode.
yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
really, these aren't going to be terrible
Okay,
for the mouth. They still both present probably the least amount of erosive risks when
good to
involved.
know.
Yeah. All right. And so I think that that is a good stopping point. Boy, we talked about a lot of different drinks, introduced some other acids, and revisited the citric acid, malic acid, all these calcium binding constants and stuff. And I think that that's important. We didn't have enough time to talk about the sports drinks, but I'm sure we'll address that at some
That's
point.
a really, really important one.
Yeah, but I think that the gist is there.
Yes.
Sports drinks are really similar to the Pedialyte. Okay.
Yes.
Does it have sugar in it? Does it have electrolytes in it? Yes
Yes.
and yes. Do they have calcium in it? No. And so, with those risks of pH and the different acids and stuff, one can easily see how they could present damages, especially if the action of the mouthwash, if there's somebody swishing, spinning,
Right.
all that stuff, is just going to be like that. So, I think that that's clear. Calcium can help mitigate that erosive damage. Again, pH is the number one factor. And then again, the types of acids. And the types of
Absolutely.
acids is chosen not just for preservation purposes, but for the overall taste profile that a
That's my most
brand
surprising
exactly
takeaway.
is trying to deliver. So I think that that's pretty good. All right. So we will talk about this again in the future, but we'll take a break from it now. The next episode will not be about this. We'll talk about something else, and that's it, I guess. So alongside Tammy, I'm Dr. Rob. We thank you for listening to Dental Formulators Playbook. Stay curious and keep smiling.